on Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus. And it was a conversation in which Nicodemus was, in a sense, struggling with what was coming to him. You can say that Nicodemus was having a crisis of faith. Crisis of faith. There's nothing worse as persons of faith or in a faith community. There's nothing worse than experiencing new learning that seems to threaten in a big way all that you've known before. I remember once, a few years back, I was looking after a parish, and we were having these midweek services. And every time we had the midweek service, at the end of the service, persons were invited to come up and receive the laying on of hands, prayer. And it was over the summer period, about 6 weeks or so in all. And I noticed that there was a lady who was coming up every Wednesday morning. And I noticed that there was stuff going on. She was experiencing something. And with every Wednesday, the experience seemed to have gone deeper and stronger. And towards the end of the period, one particular Wednesday morning, I went to her at the end of the service. She was sitting after everyone else had left, and I thought, oh, this is a wonderful time I could go and I can talk with her about these wonderful experiences that I'm perceiving that she's having. And as I came close to the lady and I said, good morning, and how are you doing? She greeted me with a very angry face. She was very angry. And I was puzzled because I couldn't understand, knowing that this great thing was happening to her, and even that particular morning I noticed that she had a wonderful experience at the altar. I couldn't understand why she would be angry. So I asked her, what's the matter? Why are you angry? And she turned to me with a stern face and said, I have been going to church for 42 years and I never knew anything about this kind of experience. Nicodemus comes to Jesus as a head of the Jewish faith community, as one who had risen up through the ranks of Judaism, and he reached the pinnacle. And at the pinnacle, he hears the words of a man, a wandering rabbi. And he perceives in the man something that he does not have. With all his position, all his ecclesiastical adornment, he doesn't have what this man has. And so he comes to him and he says, Rabboni, teacher, I know that you are a man sent to us from God. This religious leader recognizes a God-sent person. And so he acts. He opens himself to Jesus. And Jesus, perceiving what he wants to know, says, in order to enter the kingdom, you must be born from above. We know it from the old translation as you must be born again, but the more accurate translation of again is above, from above. Now, we don't hear that Nicodemus is angry, but what we are saying is, we're saying an individual to whom others should be going to ask the question, how do we enter the kingdom? And no doubt he would have given them all the listing of the Torah, the Mosaic law. But Nicodemus recognizes that this isn't it. It's something more. Now, this is one of the passages that has so much food. You could spend an entire time just unraveling all of this passage because it puts its hands in so many different parts. But one of the things that is important here is that what is it to be born again? What is it to be born from above? Now, Jesus says you have to born water and spirit. Now, we can look at our own faith tradition and we could see that, well, we have splitted the rites of initiation into the church, into baptism and confirmation. Baptism is the what? Baptism. Hello? Baptism, the symbol is water. Thank you. Phew. Baptism is the water, and confirmation is no, the other thing. Yes, somebody said it. The Spirit. Remember water and the Spirit? You must be born of water and the Spirit. So I said, baptism is the water, and confirmation is Spirit. So within that context, we have done that. But have we? Have we? Have we been born from above? To really understand this particular passage, we have to understand that this has nothing to do with human effort. This is not about something that we do or somebody does to us. So we can be baptized and we can be confirmed, we can have the laying on of hands, but that doesn't necessarily speak to the being born from above. It doesn't. In order for us to put our minds around this, I want to take us back to the Old Testament reading, where God is speaking to Abraham. God is always speaking to Moses, but this time to Abraham. And it says in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Go from your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Now, Abraham goes. Abraham goes. What's happening here? We're seeing God giving a command, and we're seeing the human person responding. This is an important motif. God initiating, man responding. God initiating, man responding. To be born from above, God initiates, man responds. That response of Abraham was called in the second reading from Romans by Paul. What was the word he called it? Somebody said it? That response was called, thank you, faith. I think the rainfall this morning, everybody cool. The response was called faith. Faith. What is faith? Now, a lot of folks misunderstand and confuse faith and belief. I want you, if you've never heard anything from me, remember, always remember this. Faith and belief are two different things, even if for no other reason than they're spelled differently. Faith and belief are two different things. I believe that most of you are here this morning are listening to me. I may be wrong, but that's my belief. Faith has nothing to do with that. Faith is a word that can only be used in a sentence where God is either mentioned or implied. Because faith, in its most accurate definition, is to put one's entire trust in. And there's only one being that we can put our entire trust in, and that is God. So when Paul talks about Abraham's response as faith, what he's saying is that Abraham, having been told by God to do this thing, Abraham responds. He puts his entire trust in this invitation to come away from your father's house. Abraham doesn't know where he's going. Abraham doesn't know what it's going to look like. He doesn't know what's required of him. All he knows is that God initiated something by saying, go. And Abraham went. We see this again in the experience of Jesus at the River Jordan. Jesus comes to John, and John is saying, but you're coming to me, but I really need to be baptized by you. And Jesus is saying, leave it be. Let it be so for now, in order that we may fulfill all things. Fulfill what all things? That which God has put in place. That which God has put in place. So, having experienced this now, having surrendered to this baptism of John, the heavens open. The dove descends. The word of God is heard. And Jesus is driven into the wilderness. This is God's work. Jesus is responding. Faith is man's response to God's initiative. To be born from above is to be engaged by God. It is not about what we've done at the font or what the bishop does. It is when God chooses and how God chooses. And sometimes it takes great effort. Why? Because oftentimes we are not looking for the next stage in this journey of earth. Oftentimes we are so caught in the first stage of life that we don't realize that that first stage is but the foundation. It is like what those of you who might have done some psychology would have heard as the hierarchy of needs by Abraham Maslow, where he speaks about those basic fundamental needs of, I forget now, food, shelter, and security. Those three things. Those three basic things. And there are many of us in this world that we go through our entire life just trying to make sure that we have food, we have shelter, and we have security. And we are caught up in that, and the world keeps us in that. Ever so often, the banks encourage us to come and get some more money in order that we can secure ourselves a little bit better. And we are caught in that cycle. And we never realize that there's something above food, security, and shelter. There's something higher. There are many other stages. It's like the child that, if allowed to, decides so in love with elementary school that it doesn't want to go to secondary school. It loves its teachers. It loves its aunties. And doesn't want to leave its aunties. It wants to spend all the rest of its childhood days at primary school. That's what we're like. The child, by an authority outside of itself, is pushed along. In the physical realm, and we must always remember that the physical teaches us about the spiritual. In the physical realm, a child, when we came into the world, there were certain things that those around us did. They fed us, they clothed us, they gave us security, they ensured that we had our vaccinations, that we were healthy, that we got whatever we need. Then when it was time to go to school, they ensured that we went to school. When it was time for us to graduate from school and go to higher school, they ensured that occurred. None of this was our doing. This was all being done to us by the adults in our world, whether those adults were our guardians or the government of Barbados or whatever. That was done by others upon us. But there's another stage, the one that Jesus is speaking of this morning. And that is the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey that uses that which we've amassed in our physical experiences. It uses that which we've amassed as the foundation on which now to build a house. Because if in our life all we have done is amass the security and the shelter and the food, then all we've done is built the foundation. And many of us leave this world with a foundation. We haven't built the house that we are yet. Because we haven't stepped over into the spiritual realm. So Nicodemus was in this place. He was accomplished. He was an accomplished person. By all eyes around him, he would be considered one of the great people of the land. He'd accomplished great things. He was a doctor of the faith. But he did not know yet anything about the house that he was to build. And so he asks. He comes to Jesus by night, seeking to find out how Jesus got to the next stage. My friends, we have Nicodemus's experience to guide us, and to help us to realize that all that we clamor for in this temporal world is nothing more than a foundation stone. It's important. It's not to be tossed away. It's important. If we are hungry and we don't know where our next meal is coming from, we can't engage things spiritually, can we? We can't. If we don't feel secure, we can't begin to think of higher things. So we need the foundation. But that's all it is. That's all it is. Any person who's built a house knows that you are happy to see the foundation in place, especially if you didn't find rock and you were hoping to find some stone to put the foundation on. You are happy when you get to the foundation level. But you're even more excited when you see the walls begin to go up. And even more so when the roof goes on and the windows go in. Because you know the house is coming to completion. These passages this morning are inviting us to become aware that there's another stage to this thing we call life. And too many of us pass through the world and don't even realize it exists. Because it has nothing to do with church. And that's why Jesus said, the prostitutes and the tax collectors are going to get into the gates of heaven before you. When he was speaking to the religious authorities. And he wasn't talking about their worthlessness necessarily. But just that for them, they believed that they were at the zenith of life. Like remember the Pharisee and the publican, he comes in and he says, I thank my God that I'm not like other men are. I give tithes to all I do. I say my prayers these amount of times, and especially I'm not like that fellow. But the publican on his knees, who wouldn't even lift up his eyes to God, what does he say? Lord, have mercy upon me, a sinner. What is he doing? He is inviting God's initiative. Lord, have mercy. If God comes and have mercy, the work begins. The publican is saying, I am open, Lord, and willing to respond. So it is not about our religious connection. Our religion is supposed to be a container to assist us in our spiritual next step. But oftentimes, our religion can hold us back. If we think by religion, it is about positions and importance. So we bring the physical dimension right into the belly of religion. When religion is supposed to take us at the zenith of that which we are working on in our physical world and guide us now forward into the higher stages of life. So therefore, at times when you speak to certain circumstances, people would say, but we have this in the church, And what that means is that, that higher way of seeing things, we're not dealing with that. This is matter of fact. This is real world here. And we as church folks, we do that. We have one way of thinking on a Sunday morning, but then as we get back into the everyday life, we shift gears, and we because you have to behave like this in order to survive in this world. So we go up and we come back down. We spend an hour and a half up and we come back down for the rest of the week. And therefore, we're never born from above. Because when you're born from above, you stay above. You don't go up and visit and come back. When you're born from above, you are born from above. And your life is changed. Because you're now engaging in the world from a higher place. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that others don't perceive it the way you do. This is your journey. We always say, God will only ask me for me. We say it in a way when we don't want to take responsibility for somebody else. But there's a truth in that, but from a good place, where the fact is that God will only ask you for you because God is interested. When it comes to you, God is only interested in you. God is only interested in your development. So it doesn't matter that others don't perceive the world from the higher place that you are perceiving it. And that's not an invitation to stop. It's not an invitation to stop. Jesus says to Nicodemus, I'm talking to you about the basic fundamentals and you don't even understand. How can I begin to talk to you about things of a higher place? And you're a religious leader. You don't understand these fundamentals, this basic foundational stuff. What are you teaching your people? That's a real question for religious leaders like myself. What are we teaching our people? If we don't understand the higher things of life, how are we teaching? What are we teaching? And the reality of many of us are teaching the fundamentals because we ourselves have not gone beyond. That's a tragedy. Because spiritual leadership is not about academic qualification. It's about being born from above. It's about taking others where you've gone. And so we must be about rebirth. And Lent is a good time to focus on rebirth. We have many respects, we have amassed the foundation. Be like the publican and invite God. Let God know that you're ready to respond to his initiative. Let God know. Jesus tells a story, in closing, Jesus tells a story about two brothers. And the father said to both of them, go work in the vineyard. And one says, I go, sir. But he never went. And the other one said, no. But he repented, he changed direction, and he went. Jesus asked the question, which one did the will of the Father? And many of us that say we are going, we are engaging in our spiritual journey. Like we start at Lent, we say we're gonna keep this lane, and nothing happens. But the thing is, let's not make that the reality. Let's stick to our word and remain committed to the spiritual path. If we haven't begun it as yet, be like the publican and say, Lord, have mercy and help me to be able to have faith in you. And if you have begun it, don't let the challenges of our life, of our world, cause us to turn back or to shut down. Don't let the need to fit in cause you to surrender your forward journey. Don't be fooled that you need to adopt the way of the world in order to live in this world. Because this world is God's world. And it makes more sense to adopt the way of God to live in this world than to adopt the blindness of the world in order to live blindly among other blind people in this world. We are lights if we allow ourselves